before this life.
His name is Warwick, 6 years old, a bright, energetic Aboriginal boy living in Darwin, in Australia's Northern Territory, with his grandmother, mother, and 2 younger sisters. His family is Larrakia people, the traditional custodians of the Darwin region. They're part of a community working to preserve and revive cultural knowledge that colonial violence tried to erase. Warwick's grandmother, Auntie Rose, is an elder. She knows the stories, the language fragments that survived, the connection to country that her own grandmother fought to preserve. She teaches the children what she can, what wasn't lost, what can still be remembered. But there are gaps. So many gaps. Languages silenced. Songs forgotten. Knowledge destroyed when the old people died. When missions separated families. When speaking your own tongue was forbidden. Warwick was like any other child in their community. He loved playing football with his cousins. He attended the local school. He was learning Larrakia language in cultural classes, struggling with pronunciation like all the children, working to reclaim words his ancestors spoke fluently. Until the night Auntie Rose heard him singing. She woke to the sound of a voice, not a child's voice exactly, though it came from the room where Warwick slept, deeper, older, carrying a melody that made her heart stop. She recognized the rhythm, the pattern, but not the words. Not quite. They were close to Larrakia, but different. Older, somehow. Like hearing your language spoken by someone from centuries ago. Auntie Rose moved to Warwick's doorway. He sat cross-legged on his bed, eyes closed, swaying slightly, singing. The moonlight through his window made him look ethereal, displaced in time. The song went on for several minutes. When it ended, Warwick opened his eyes and saw his grandmother. "Sorry, Nan," he said. "Did I wake you?" "Warwick, where did you learn that song?" The boy looked confused. "What song? The one you were just singing?" "I was singing?" He seemed genuinely surprised. "I was dreaming. About walking. Walking so far. Following the paths. The old man was teaching me." "What old man?" Warwick's expression shifted, became distant. "The songkeeper. That's what they called him. He knew all the songs, all the paths. He taught the young men. He kept the knowledge safe." Auntie Rose felt chills despite the warm Darwin night. "What was his name?" "Tjukurpa," Warwick said. The word meant dreaming or dream time in many Aboriginal languages. But the way he said it, it sounded like a name. Personal, specific. "That was me," Warwick continued. "Before I was Warwick. When I was old and knew the songs. Before they came. Before everything changed. They came. Before everything changed." Warwick spoke like someone who'd witnessed the destruction of a world. Over the following days, the songs continued. Sometimes at night. Sometimes during the day. Warwick would suddenly start singing in that strange old dialect, his voice carrying melodies that made the elders stop and listen with tears in their eyes. "Those songs are from the old time," one elder said. "My grandmother mentioned them. She said they were lost. No one alive knows them anymore." But Warwick knew them. And he sang them with the confidence of someone who'd sung them 1,000 times before. He began talking about the paths, the songlines, the intricate networks of roots across Australia that Aboriginal peoples had maintained for tens of thousands of years. Each path encoded in song, the landscape remembered through melody, the very ground itself, a book written in music. "You sing the country," Warwick explained to his mother one evening. "You sing where the water is, where the food grows, where the sacred places are. The song tells you how to travel, how to survive, how to know where you are. Without the songs, you're lost." His mother, Sarah, was stunned. Warwick was 6. These concepts, songlines as navigation, landscape as songtext, were complex ideas that scholars spent years studying. How did her first grader understand them with such depth? "Tjukurpa taught me," Warwick said simply. "That was his job, to know the songs and teach them so they wouldn't be forgotten. He was old, very old. He'd learned from his grandfather, who learned from his grandfather, going back and back to the beginning. He started drawing maps that looked nothing like modern maps. Flowing, organic patterns, showing waterholes, rock formations, travel routes. The kind of maps that existed in Aboriginal memory for millennia before Europeans drew straight lines and imposed grids on ancient country. "This is the path to the stone place," he'd explain, tracing a curving line with his finger. "You follow the creek until you see the hill shaped like a sleeping kangaroo. Then you go where the sun rises, 3 days walking. There's water here and here. You sing this part," and he'd hum a melody, each note apparently corresponding to a landmark. Auntie Rose recognized some of what he described. Sacred sites she knew, places she'd been taken as a child, but other details were new, or rather, old, knowledge that should have been lost. "The stone place?" she asked carefully. "What happened there?" Warwick's face clouded. "The ceremony place, where the young men went to become men, where the law was taught, where the old stories were kept." "Where is it, Warwick? Can you show me?" He drew a more detailed map. When Auntie Rose studied it, consulting with other elders, they realized Warwick was describing a site deep in Arnhem Land, over 300 kilometers away. A place he'd never visited. A place marked in some anthropological records as a significant ceremonial ground. But here's what made Auntie Rose's hands shake. The site had been damaged in the 1880 seconds, a massacre site. Where Aboriginal people had fled during the frontier wars, the violent conflicts as European settlers pushed into the Northern Territory. Historical records mentioned it briefly. A dispersal, the euphemistic colonial term for mass killing. Aboriginal people had taken refuge at a sacred site. Colonial police and settlers had attacked. The old people who survived didn't speak of it much. Too painful, too traumatic. The knowledge was there, but buried deep. Yet Warwick knew it, and he spoke of it not with historical distance, but with personal memory. "I was there when they came," he said quietly one evening. "The men with guns, on horses. We ran to the stone place because it was sacred. We thought they wouldn't follow us there, but they didn't care about sacred. They didn't understand sacred. They just wanted us gone." Sarah held her son, feeling him shake with memories he shouldn't carry. "Warwick, baby, how do you know these things?" He looked at her with eyes far too old for 6 years. "Because I died there, Mum. Tjukurpa died there. He was trying to protect the younger ones, trying to use his body as a shield. But the bullets came anyway. And the songs he was supposed to teach. He was so scared they'd die with him." Sarah didn't know what to do. In their community, reincarnation wasn't a strange concept. Many Aboriginal cultures had long traditions of souls returning, of ancestors being reborn within families, of knowledge passing through generations in ways Western science couldn't easily explain. But Warwick's case felt different, more urgent. He wasn't just claiming to remember a past life. He was carrying knowledge, songs, language, cultural information that the community had thought was lost forever. Auntie Rose made a decision. She contacted the Larrakia Nation Aboriginal Corporation, the representative body for their people. She spoke with cultural knowledge holders, language specialists, historians who'd spent decades trying to piece together what colonization had destroyed. Dr. Linda Burramara, a Yolngu woman and anthropologist who specialized in Aboriginal oral traditions and songlines, traveled to Darwin to meet Warwick. Dr. Burramara had spent 30 years documenting Aboriginal knowledge systems. She'd worked with elders across the Northern Territory, recording songs, stories, and language before the last speakers passed. She'd seen the devastating gaps where knowledge should be but wasn't erased by missions, massacres, and forced assimilation. She was cautiously open to Warwick's case. In her research, she'd encountered several instances of children in Aboriginal communities who seemed to remember past lives. It aligned with traditional beliefs. But she'd never encountered a child who claimed to carry specific cultural knowledge from someone who died over a century ago. She spent a week with Warwick, recording everything he said, every song he sang, every map he drew. She never led him, never suggested answers, always letting him speak first. Warwick sang her songs in a dialect she'd only encountered in fragmented recordings from the 1,930 seconds, made by anthropologists interviewing the last speakers of what was then called the Old Language, the dialect. Had been considered extinct, with perhaps a few dozen words surviving in modern Laurakia. But Warwick sang full verses, complex grammatical structures, vocabulary no one had used in living memory. Dr. Buramara brought language specialists to listen. They analyzed his pronunciation, his grammar, his word choices. The consensus was stunning. Warwick was speaking a form of Laurakia that predated European contact. Pre-colonial Laurakia, reconstructed through linguistic analysis, but never actually heard spoken fluently. Until now. Where did you learn these words? Dr. Buramara asked gently. Tjukurpa knew them, Warwick said. Everyone knew them then. It was just how we talked. Before the mission, people came and said we had to talk their way. The missions. The historical record confirmed that Christian missions in the Northern Territory had forbidden Aboriginal languages, punishing children for speaking their mother tongues. Generations grew up unable to pass their language to their children. The linguistic genocide was systematic and effective. But if Warwick's memories were genuine, he carried language from before that destruction. From when Aboriginal people spoke their tongues freely, when the old words were just words, not fragments to be preserved in archives. Dr. Buramara showed Warwick photographs of locations across the Northern Territory. Some she identified, some she didn't. Just landscapes, rock formations, water holes. Warwick studied each image carefully. Most meant nothing to him. No, I don't know that place. But several made him react immediately. That's on the path to the stone place. You stop here for water. There's a fig tree nearby. You can eat the fruit if it's the right season. Dr. Buramara checked her notes. The location was indeed near a traditional water source. Historical records mentioned Aboriginal people camping there regularly. There was no fig tree visible in the modern photograph. But vegetation changes over 140 years. Another photograph made Warwick very quiet. That's where the massacre happened. That's where Tjukurpa died. The image showed a rocky outcrop in Arnhem Land. Dr. Buramara had deliberately not identified it, but historical records confirmed it as the site of an 1,880 seconds dispersal, a massacre during the frontier wars. How did you know? She asked softly. Because I remember falling there. The sound of the guns. The smell of smoke, people screaming, running. The stones were red. I thought it was the sunset, but it was blood. End quote. He described the event with details that matched oral histories collected decades earlier from descendants of survivors. The time of day, the direction the attackers came from, the fact that women and children had been specifically targeted. The way some people tried to climb the rocks to escape. Details not in textbooks. Details preserved only in Aboriginal community memory, passed down quietly, painfully, through generations who survived. Dr. Buramara documented everything, her hands sometimes shaking as she wrote. This wasn't just a past life case. This was witness testimony to genocide, from someone who'd been there, whose consciousness, if such things could persist, carried first-hand knowledge of events most history books barely mentioned. She brought in specialists to test Warwick's knowledge of songlines. They showed him topographical maps, no labels, no identifying markers, just the physical geography of the Northern Territory. Can you show us the paths, the routes your people traveled? Warwick studied the maps. Then he began tracing routes with his finger, explaining where the songs told you to go, where the water was reliable, where certain plants grew, where sacred sites demanded particular respect. The routes he traced matched documented songlines, paths that Aboriginal people had traveled for tens of thousands of years, encoded in oral tradition, largely disrupted by colonization. But Warwick added details that weren't in the modern records. Side paths, seasonal variations, connections between songlines that had been lost when the people who knew them died. This part was Tjukurpa's responsibility, he explained, indicating a section of country south of Darwin. He knew the songs for this area. He taught the young men. When you walked this path, you had to sing the Redstone Song, then the Waterbird Song, Then the ancestor song. Each one tells you where to go next. He began singing. The red stone song. The water bird song. The ancestor song. An elder who'd come with Dr. Buramara started crying. My grandmother used to hum something like that. She said it was from the old people, but she couldn't remember all of it. She said the words were forgotten. Warwick had just sung what the elder's grandmother couldn't remember, had retrieved from his memories, or from Tjukurpa's memories, carried across a century-and-a-half songs that had been on the edge of extinction. Dr. Buramara made a proposal. Would Warwick's family allow her to take the boy to the actual locations, to walk some of the paths he'd described, to visit the sites he'd mentioned? It was unusual, potentially traumatic. But both Sarah and Auntie Rose felt that Warwick needed this, needed to honor what he remembered, needed to walk the country that Tjukurpa had walked. Arrangements were made with the traditional owners of the land. Permissions granted. Protocols observed. This wasn't tourism. This was a cultural journey, a ceremonial act, a reconnection across time. The journey took them deep into Arnhem Land, to country where traditional Aboriginal culture remained stronger than in most of Australia, where the old people still knew the songs, where the land was still understood as living, sacred, connected. They traveled with permission, with ceremony, with respect. Dr. Buramara, several elders from different clan groups, rangers from the local land council, and of course, Warwick, Sarah, and Auntie Rose. The moment they reached the first significant site, a waterhole Warwick had described in his drawings, he began to cry. I know this place, he whispered. Tjukurpa came here so many times, to teach, to sit with the young men, to pass on the knowledge. One of the elders, an old man named Uncle Barry, who'd walked this country all his life, studied Warwick with quiet intensity. What song do you sing here, boy? Warwick wiped his tears and began to sing a song about water, about the ancestors who created this place in the dream time, about the proper way to approach, to ask permission, to take water without disrespecting the spirits. Uncle Barry's weathered face showed profound emotion. That's the old song, the real old song. My grandfather tried to teach me, but he only knew pieces. He said the rest was lost. He said the songkeeper who knew all of it died in the Troubles, in the killing times. He looked at Warwick with something like reverence. Maybe that songkeeper came back. Maybe the knowledge didn't want to stay lost. They walked the song line Warwick had described. 3 days of walking, camping at sites he'd indicated. At each place, Warwick would describe what he remembered, the ceremonies that happened there, the stories associated with each location, the songs that belonged to that piece of country. And at each place, the elders confirmed, yes, this is right. This is what the old people said. This is what we almost forgot. It was like watching cultural knowledge resurrect itself through the memories of a 6-year-old child. On the 3rd day, they reached the stone place, the massacre site. Warwick approached slowly, his small body tense. The rock formation rose from the surrounding bush red stone, weathered and ancient, marked by time and violence. This is where it happened, he said quietly. This is where Tjukurpa died. The elders performed a smoking ceremony, cleansing the space, honoring the ancestors, acknowledging the trauma this place held. Warwick sat on the ground, touching the stones. They came just before sunset. We'd been here for 2 days, hiding. We knew they were looking for us. They'd already attacked other groups, killed so many. We thought maybe the sacred place would protect us, that they'd respect the ceremony ground. His voice was small but clear, a child speaking memories from a man dead for over a century. But they didn't care. They rode their horses right up to the stones. They had guns. They started shooting. Women, children, old people. Didn't matter. They wanted us gone from the country, gone from everywhere. Sarah held her son while he spoke, tears streaming down her face. The elders sat in a circle around them, witnessing, honoring, holding space for the truth to be spoken. Tjukurpa tried to protect the younger ones, Warwick continued. He stood up. He sang. He sang the ancestor songs, the protection songs, the strongest songs he knew. He thought maybe the songs would shield them. Maybe the ancestors would intervene. He looked up at the sky, the sun beginning its descent toward the horizon, just as it would have been that day in the 1,880 seconds. But the bullets came anyway. One hit him here. He touched his left shoulder, and here, his chest. He fell, and as he was dying, he was so scared that all the songs would die with him, that the knowledge would be lost, that his people would forget who they were, where they came from, how to sing the country. Uncle Barry spoke, his voice thick with emotion. The songs didn't die, boy, because you came back. You brought them back. The knowledge didn't want to stay dead. Dr. Burramara examined Warwick with new urgency. Warwick, may I look at your shoulder and chest? With your mum's permission? Sarah nodded. Warwick removed his shirt. There, on his left shoulder and chest, exactly where he'd pointed, were birthmarks, dark, roughly circular, positioned precisely where bullet wounds would have been. Dr. Burramara photographed them. Later, she'd consult with medical experts and other past life researchers. The birthmark's size, shape, and location were consistent with gunshot entry wounds. But beyond the physical evidence, something profound happened at that stone place. The elders began singing. Songs they remembered partially. Songs their grandparents had taught them. Songs from the old time. And Warwick joined them, his young voice blending with the old voices, filling in the gaps, completing the verses, singing the parts that had been forgotten. It wasn't a child singing, not entirely. It was Tjukurpa singing through Warwick, or Warwick singing Tjukurpa's knowledge, or perhaps both at once, a continuity of consciousness across 140 years, ensuring that what was meant to be preserved wasn't lost forever. The sun set over the stone place, the same sun that had set on the day of the massacre, the same light on the same stones where Aboriginal people had died for being Aboriginal, for existing on their own country, for being in the way of colonial expansion. But now, in that same place, the songs were being sung again. The language was being spoken again. The knowledge was being reclaimed. One of the younger rangers, a man in his 20s, approached Auntie Rose. My great-great-grandmother survived what happened here. She was a child. She hid in the rocks and wasn't found. She lived to be very old. She told my grandmother about it, but she was too traumatized to remember much. Just that it was terrible, that so many died. He looked at Warwick with tears in his eyes. I think maybe one of the people who died was this boy, was Tjukurpa, and maybe he came back because the story needed to be told properly, because the songs needed to be saved. That night, they camped near the stone place. Warwick slept peacefully for the first time since the memories had started. No nightmares, no crying out. Just deep, restful sleep. In the morning, he seemed lighter. The weight of the memories had eased. Not gone, but integrated, accepted. Tjukurpa is okay now, he told his mother. He knows the songs are safe. He knows people are singing them again. He can rest. When they returned to Darwin, something had shifted. Word had spread through the Aboriginal community about Warwick's journey, about the songs he'd sung, about the knowledge he carried. Elders from different clan groups came to listen. Language specialists came to record. Teachers came to learn what could be taught. Warwick's songs were documented, analyzed, and carefully integrated into language revival programs. The dialect he spoke was studied, compared with historical linguistic records, used to fill gaps in reconstructed Larakia and related languages. Dr. Burramara published her findings in academic journals, presenting Warwick's case at conferences on Aboriginal culture, linguistic preservation, and consciousness studies. The response was complex. Some scholars dismissed it Outright impossible, they said, for a child to know extinct language forms and lost songs. He must have absorbed information somehow, unconsciously learned from fragments in the community. But the linguists who'd worked directly with Warwick disagreed. "He's not speaking reconstructed language," one explained. "He's speaking fluently, with grammatical structures we've never heard before, but that make perfect linguistic sense as earlier forms of modern Larakia. He's providing corrections to our reconstructions. He's teaching us." The songs were perhaps even more significant. Aboriginal songlines encoded not just cultural knowledge, but practical information, water sources, food resources, safe travel routes, seasonal patterns. They were oral archives of thousands of years of accumulated wisdom. Warwick's songs included details about the landscape that could be verified, where water could be found in dry seasons, where certain plants grew, migration patterns of animals, information that matched both ecological records and remaining Aboriginal oral knowledge. But he also sang songs about places that had changed dramatically since the 1,880 seconds, waterholes that had dried up due to modern land use, sacred sites that had been destroyed or built over. His songs described the country as it was before significant European alteration. Archaeologists and ecologists began consulting Warwick's descriptions for research purposes. His memories, or Tjukurpa's memories, provided baseline data about the Northern Territory's environment 140 years ago. The Aboriginal community responded with a mixture of wonder and pragmatic acceptance. For people who'd always believed in the continuity of spirit, in ancestors returning, in the land itself holding memory, Warwick's case wasn't impossible. It was confirmation of what they'd always known. "Our old people always said the songs would come back when they were needed most," Auntie Rose told a gathering at the cultural center. "When we were ready to receive them, when we were doing the work to reclaim our culture." Maybe Tjukurpa came back because we're finally ready to listen. A cultural revival program was established. Tjukurpa's Songs, they called it, with permission from Warwick and his family. Elders and young people learned the songs together, studied the language, walked portions of the song lines under the guidance of traditional owners. Warwick participated when he could, when the memories were clear, when he felt strong enough. But there was a conscious effort not to burden him, not to treat him as merely a vessel for someone else's knowledge. "He's a child first," Sarah insisted. "He's Warwick. He has his own life to live. If he remembers being Tjukurpa, that's part of his story. But it's not his whole story." As Warwick grew older, the memory stabilized rather than faded. This was unusual. Most children with past life memories forgot around ages 7 or 8. But Warwick's case was different because the knowledge he carried was being actively used, actively valued, actively integrated into living culture. He wasn't just remembering a personal past life. He was serving as a bridge, reconnecting his community with cultural heritage that colonization had tried to destroy. By the time he turned 8, he'd taught 3 full song lines to community members, had helped correct and expand language documentation, had assisted in identifying sacred sites that had been lost to modern records. He'd also begun to separate himself from Tjukurpa, to understand that while he carried these memories, he was his own person with his own interests, dreams, and personality. He loved playing video games and watching superhero movies, thoroughly modern pursuits, but he also loved going out on country, singing the old songs, feeling the connection to land that stretched back tens of thousands of years. Dr. Buramara's final research paper, published 3 years after her initial visit, concluded, "Whether we interpret Warwick's case through the lens of reincarnation, genetic memory, cultural transmission through unknown mechanisms, or some combination thereof, the result is undeniable. Genuine Aboriginal knowledge, thought to be lost, has been recovered and revitalized through this child's memories. From a cultural preservation standpoint, the mechanism matters less than the outcome. The songs were alive again. The language was being spoken again. Young people were learning and passing it on." Uncle Barry, now in his 80s, said it best. "I thought I'd die before hearing the full water song. I thought that knowledge was gone forever, buried with the old people. But I heard a 6-year-old boy sing what my grandfather couldn't remember. That boy brought back what the bullets tried to kill. That's more than memory. That's the ancestors taking care of us. The stone place where the massacre occurred was officially recognized and protected. A memorial was erected, listing the names of known victims. Tjukurpa's name wasn't on historical records. He'd been lost to documentation, just another anonymous Aboriginal person killed in the frontier wars. But Warwick made sure he was remembered. At the memorial ceremony, he spoke about Tjukurpa, about his role as songkeeper, about his final act of trying to protect the younger ones, about his fear that the knowledge would die. But it didn't die, Warwick said, his young voice carrying across the gathered crowd. He came back. I came back. The songs came back. The ancestors made sure we didn't forget. What do we make of Warwick's story? What do we do with a 6-year-old Aboriginal boy who sang songs in a language thought extinct, who drew maps of songlines not walked in generations, who carried knowledge from an elder killed in colonial violence 140 years ago? The skeptical explanations exist. Perhaps Warwick absorbed information from community members without conscious awareness. Perhaps fragments of songs and language survived in ways researchers didn't document. Perhaps the birthmarks are coincidental marks we interpret as meaningful. Perhaps. But these explanations struggle against the specificity, against singing complete verses in pre-colonial dialect that linguists confirmed as authentic earlier forms of the language, against identifying massacre sites from unlabeled photographs, against teaching songlines that corrected and expanded modern documentation, against knowledge that tangibly helped revive endangered cultural heritage. The correlation doesn't prove consciousness survives death and returns. Science cannot measure such things, cannot test them in ways that satisfy empirical demands. But Aboriginal cultures have known for tens of thousands of years what Western science is only beginning to consider: that consciousness might not be confined to individual lifetimes. That knowledge can pass through generations in ways beyond genetic inheritance. That the land itself holds memory, and those properly connected to country can access what the land remembers. If consciousness can persist beyond physical death, if spirit can return to continue unfinished work, then Warwick's case makes sense within Aboriginal worldview. Tjukurpa's work wasn't finished. The songs weren't all taught. The knowledge was in danger of permanent loss. So the spirit returned, found a child in the community, used that child's voice to sing what needed to be preserved. Whether we understand this through the lens of reincarnation, ancestral connection, cultural memory, or something else entirely, the practical outcome is undeniable. Knowledge was saved. Culture was strengthened. A community was reconnected with heritage that colonization tried to erase. Dr. Jim Tucker's research focuses primarily on spontaneous past life memories in young children. But cases like Warwick's add a dimension that goes beyond individual memory. They suggest that consciousness might serve collective purposes, preserving cultural knowledge, maintaining continuity, ensuring that what's important isn't lost even when individual lives end violently or prematurely. Warwick is 10 now, a normal boy in many ways. He loves school, plays football, argues with his sisters, and dreams of becoming a ranger to help care for country. The memories of being Tjukurpa haven't faded, but they've settled. They're part of him, but they don't define him. He understands he carries something important, but he's also just a kid trying to navigate childhood. He still sings the songs, still goes out on country with the elders, still helps teach language classes. But now there are others who know the songs too. The burden isn't his alone anymore. The knowledge is being shared, passed on, woven back into living culture. "I'm glad Tjukurpa found me," he said recently. "I'm glad he trusted me with the songs. But I'm also glad other people know them now. I'm glad I don't have to carry it all by myself anymore." In Aboriginal communities across Australia, Warwick's story has traveled, not as scientific curiosity, but as confirmation of what many already believed: that the ancestors watch over their descendants, that cultural knowledge is sacred enough to survive death, that the land and the spirits will ensure that what needs to be remembered isn't forgotten. Several other children have come forward in different communities, claiming memories of ancestors, singing old songs, speaking language their parents didn't teach them. Whether these are genuine past life memories or some other mechanism of cultural transmission, they're being honored, documented, and used to strengthen cultural revival efforts. The songs that colonial violence tried to silence are being sung again, by children who shouldn't know them, by elders grateful to hear what they thought was lost, by communities reclaiming what was stolen. At the Stone Place, the massacre site where Tjukurpa died, annual ceremonies are now held. The songs are sung, the ancestors are honored. The land is healed, slowly, through acknowledgement and remembrance. Warwick participates when he can, standing where Tjukurpa stood, singing what Tjukurpa sang, but no longer alone, surrounded by community, surrounded by people who know the songs now, who will pass them on, who will ensure they survive. This is what Tjukurpa wanted, Uncle Barry says each year at the ceremony. Not to be remembered himself particularly, but for the songs to be remembered, for the knowledge to survive, for our people to stay connected to country and culture. He looks at Warwick with deep affection. This boy gave us that gift, or the ancestors gave us that gift through this boy. Either way, we're grateful. Warwick's case invites us to expand our understanding of memory, consciousness, and cultural transmission, to consider that knowledge might survive in ways we don't fully understand, that the boundary between individual minds and collective cultural memory might be more permeable than Western thought typically allows. It reminds us that colonization tried to destroy Aboriginal culture through violence, forced assimilation, and systematic erasure of language and tradition. But it failed. Not entirely, not completely, but it failed to achieve total destruction. Because songs refuse to die, knowledge finds ways to persist. And sometimes, just sometimes, an elder who died defending his culture comes back through a child's voice to finish teaching what was interrupted by bullets. We don't know how this works. We can't explain it with current scientific frameworks. We can measure the outcomes, documented language revival, recovered cultural knowledge, strengthened community connections, but we can't fully explain the mechanism. But maybe that's okay. Maybe not everything needs to be explained to be honored. Maybe some mysteries are meant to be witnessed and respected rather than solved. If this story touched you, if it made you question what you thought you knew about consciousness, cultural memory, and whether knowledge can truly die, you're not alone. Every week, we explore another mystery, another child, another impossible memory that challenges everything we understand about life, death, and the nature of the soul. Subscribe to Before This Life. Join thousands of truth seekers in this journey, because some questions are worth asking, some mysteries deserve our wonder, and some songs, like those of the Aboriginal songkeepers, deserve to be sung forever. What's your theory about Warwick's knowledge? Can cultural wisdom survive death and return? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's explore this together. This has been Before This Life.